Popular devotion to Our Lady was not a prominent feature in the Western Church during the early Middle Ages. Certain saints, such as Augustine and Ildefonse, to name only a couple, cultivated a strong personal veneration of the Blessed Virgin. But on the whole, it was not something that had trickled down to the grassroots level. Things began to change when we reached the High Middle Ages towards the end of the 11th century. Marian devotion grows rapidly and gives rise to an immense output of literature in the form of treatises, hymns, poetry and song. Much of it in Latin, of course, for the consumption of the clergy, but also a significant amount directed to a more general public in the vernacular languages of Europe. One of the fruits of this expansion of Marian literature is a work called Los Milagros de Nuestra Señora, The Miracles of Our Lady, by Gonzalo de Berceo, a well-educated Spanish priest who lived in the region of La Rioja in northern Spain during the first half of the 13th century. The poetic and quite reverent introduction to his work gives the impression that we're going to be treated to a pious and devotional account, in verse, of a series of miracles attributed to Our Lady. What follows, however, is a collection of stories culled from various sources which, like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, contain a great deal of ribald humour that modern readers may find hard to relate to the doctrinal content. One of them, miracle number 21 in the collection, is called La Abadesa Encinta, the Pregnant Abbess. The story is a bit complicated, but in essence it goes as follows. The unnamed abbess of an unspecified convent, well liked by all and sundry for her kindness and generosity and for the charitable way in which she governed her community, falls victim one day to a great temptation and becomes pregnant. As the outward signs of her pregnancy develop, an increase in weight, a change in shape and complexion, discord arises in the convent. Her detractors in the community inform the local bishop of their suspicions, and he comes to the convent to deal with the case. While he's resting from his journey, the abbess, who has always had a great devotion to the Blessed Virgin, prays fervently to Our Lady to liberate her from her distress. Our Lady, taking pity on her, appears to her in the company of two angels. Together they assist in an absolutely painless childbirth, and the angels carry off the child to be cared for by a hermit. The abbess gives copious thanks to Our Lady, but is then called into the presence of the bishop to explain herself. He is ready to remove her from her duties, but insists on a full investigation by trustworthy priests who conduct a full physical examination of the abbess. When they find no evidence whatsoever, neither of pregnancy nor of childbirth, the bishop turns upon the detractors, threatening to expel them from the convent. At this point, the abbess takes him aside and confesses the truth. The astounded bishop restores peace to the convent and makes provision for the care and education of the infant, who in due time becomes a holy priest and is handed the reins of the diocese after the bishop dies. A jaded modern reader might claim that it's nothing more than a titillating tale made officially acceptable by a pious conclusion. Yet those who are familiar with medieval life and literature know that the sacred and the profane share the same space. There is a constant jostling between the freedom of carnival and the restrictions of Lent. The physical and the spiritual coexist in an intimate way. They're often contrasted, but they're also intertwined in a very existential fashion by a people much more attuned to the harsh, concrete realities of daily life than most of us are in our comfortable modern environment. The episode of the abbess's succumbing to physical temptation is vividly contrasted with her eloquent and sincere plea for God's forgiveness and mercy through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin. What I think we have in this story is a pretty clear portrayal of Our Lady's role as mediatrix between mankind and God, presented in a way that will catch our attention much more vividly than an abstract theological treatise. The story reminds us that, like it or not, we are all prone to sin of one kind or another, no matter how devout we strive to be, and that none of us can claim the privilege of casting the first stone. Sin may cause us social strife or rejection in this world, but true repentance will greatly improve our lot in the next, and Our Lady, time after time after time, is there to help. And yet, though we may believe and accept this, I think that the big challenge that many of us face, and I certainly do, is the progress from intellectual assent to an actual personal relationship with Our Lady, with Jesus and with God the Father. I could recite the standard prayers with no intellectual qualms whatsoever, yet belief, for me at least, is not at all the same thing as knowing, of having a direct personal contact with Our Lady and with God, of somehow feeling their presence in my bones. They still remain for me a distant reality, not unlike my relatives on the other side of the Atlantic, rather than friendly next-door neighbors with whom I can have a daily chat over the garden fence. So, while I try to figure out how to rectify this situation, and I would welcome any suggestions, I continue to remain most envious of Father Berceo's Pregnant Abbess, who, in spite of her most visible human lapse, kept open a vital and very personal line of communication with God through her devotion to our Mother of Perpetual Help.